court cases. And so the essays, I got some makeup to finish up, but then I'll try to get it back as soon as I can. And I got a lot graded, but I still have more to do. And I was going to grade during my first period, but I ended up reading about the Supreme Court and elections. And so there's a massive decision right now in front of the Supreme Court. And what is, I'll get to it. I'll tell you. I will tell you today. And there's a big election yesterday. It just goes to show you that people think there's a mandate when there was a little bit over 1% victory for President Trump and Republicans in 2024. Then there were elections last night, and they were, even though smaller scale, like shocking victories for Democrats. So this goes to show you that there's no mandate. And the people who decide elections are variable. They can switch back and forth in the United States. And it's just interesting how things happen here. Also kind of scary. Moving on. We get this? Yes. What was the compromise of 1820? Name for it, but it got the compromise in 1820. They split the bill, but what's the name of the compromise? The Missouri Compromise. Yeah. Missouri came in as a slave state. What state came in as a free state? Maine. Maine came in. And no slavery north of what latitude line in Louisiana Purchase? Yeah, 3630. But it's only for here. And Southerners wanted to spread slavery out. More slave states, they might get this. Oh, what state, what country did this become? That's going to become Mexico. All this. They want more slave states to do because they want. What was the term for the balance? What branch of the House or the Senate do they want balance? Yeah, the Senate, because equal numbers per state. So let's get back to 18. We got 1824, didn't we? Oh, one thing to just remind you, and I'll remind you again, this is leading up to the issue that would lead to civil war, slavery in the territories. Because Southern slave states were desperate for more slave states to protect slavery in their states. And that would be the issue. Abraham Lincoln was no abolitionist. Abraham Lincoln was opposed to slavery in the territories. Yes. Left your body. The chat is really good. It's a great job. He's good at leaving it. He's good at leaving it under the desk. And so we got Clay, Jackson, or Adams, Crawford. They showed that the era of good feelings was kind of illusionary. Did we get right here? Who's the person who said they would be the vice president? John C. Calhoun. B, by the way, he's thinking about growing some neck hair. That's your book. Yeah. All right. So can we get to this? Did we get to the corrupt bargain? Did we go?
No, Wednesday House.
Is that why we would quit?
Yeah.
Perfect. First time voters would choose electors, which by the way is how people do it today, but that's why it's so chaotic. And see all the different colors for the different candidates, you can see why we have two parties. Because if there's any more than two, the vote is divided and split up. That's why every place that has winner take all will go to two parties. So if you don't like the two-party system or think it's unrepresentative, then you have to change the winner takes all. Which could be done, but we have not done it here, obviously. So the went to the House of Representatives. Crawford had a stroke, so he's out of it. The top three went to the House. Clay was Speaker of the House. And remember, Clay had his program called the American System. And since Adams supported the American system, Clay threw his huge support to Adams. Now, do we get this? This part we did not get, right? Clay supported Adams. Why? Because of the American system of tariffs bank, supported the bank, and internal improvements. And it worked. Adams was elected. Adams was elected in the House, so just below star by Adams, however you want to designate this. But then immediately, Clay was made Secretary of State. Every president except for John Adams was Secretary of State. So it seemed like he is picking his successor, anointing him, like picking the next king. And many said it's a fraud, especially Jackson supporters, more and more to be called Democrats. This shows the corruption of Jefferson's old party, the Republicans, that this corrupt bargain could take place. And that's what it's going to be known as, the corrupt bargain. Now, yeah, without a doubt, Adams probably said to Clay, help me, I'll make you Secretary of State. But Clay was going to support Adams anyways because of the American system. This is the way politics work, but of course, Jackson supporters, which are going to hold the majority of the House and the Senate, are going to use that against Adams. Two things. First off, this is a political cartoon showing the election campaign. And I have no idea what's going on. There's guys in beaver felt top hats. This is Clay. That's Jackson. That's got to be Adams. I have no idea, but stuff is going on here. But add this. Adams' administration turned to be a disaster. He couldn't get anything he wanted done because of Jackson's supporters. So Adams' administration and people who might have been allies in the South, like big plantation owners, hated Adams. They thought he was against the spread of slavery, which he was. He never stated it till later. And so the Adams administration was kind of a failure. And so you have these 4 years. We're not going to go into details because we got to move right on to the next election. The election of 1828, a rematch. John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. But it's really going to be an argument about democracy. Should regular people have the right to choose the president or only a small group of elite? And Jackson represented the people. And you might notice one thing here, I accidentally hit the mouse. Look at Adams. I put this picture up and I immediately realized something. So going back, I add this picture. Doesn't he look like a salamander?
Yeah.
Look at it, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of creepy. I can't tell, I'm not a doctor, but I bet he only has 3 chambers in his heart. Like an amphibian, right? You gotta know some science.
Okay.
They only have 3 chambers, they don't have 4 chambers.
So he looks like a lizard because he has 3 chambers.
He said salamander, lizards have 4 chambers.
My bad.
He's bad in
Sorry.
Wow.
Now, is he a reptilian shapeshifter called a reptoid bent on world domination? Maybe. That's a valid point. So, the election was a nasty one. It was riddled with personal attacks. But there was one big policy issue. A tariff increase was brought up to the floor of Congress, called the Tariff of 1828. And it would more than double the 25% tariff passed in 1816. In fact, for textiles, it would double the 25% overall tariff. The tariff on textiles would actually go to over 60%. So a massive tax increase on importers, meaning consumers. But this was kind of a Democratic trick, supporter of Jackson. Democrats knew that Adams wanted the tariff. And so they allowed it to get through Congress. Some voted for it. So Adams would have a problem. If he vetoed the tariff because it was too high, he would look like a hypocrite. If he voted for it, the Democrats could turn around and say, you're responsible for the massive price increases and the increase in taxes. You're responsible. So they thought they were playing a trick. And it was crude. It never should have worked. It worked. Adams signed the tariff of 1828 And many of the same people who voted for it turned around and called this tariff the tariff of abomination. Like the font? Like the font, isn't that cool? Yes. Okay. Go on. You got to match that font in your. That tariff of abomination. It was so crude, but it's amazing how this works. Things like that would never work today. That's me lying. It's amazing how things that seem so obvious to those people paying attention can work against people who are busy with life and not paying attention. And I could not find a graph of the tariffs today that outside the tariff of abominations. Because they went back to 1896, was the only ones I could find for today. So here's tariff, and then the post-Civil War high tariffs. They drop, and then the tariff passed right in the beginning of the Great Depression, which was a disaster. Then you notice tariffs very low. But here's the thing about tariffs. Tariffs raise all prices. Importers pay the tax, which means they go pass it on to the consumers. And that's why prices are going up pretty dramatically now because of tariffs. So this is the closest graph I could find, and it doesn't have all of President Trump's tariffs, but it has the post-Civil War high, how they smoothed, and then going up today. But he's given out so many exemptions, and there are people voting the taxes. The effective rate is different than the stated rate. It's really confusing now, but that's what's being argued right now in the Supreme Court. President Trump is using a law from 1974 for the president to deal with economic emergencies. It never says the president can raise tariffs. But what President Trump says, there's an economic emergency, declared a state of economic emergency, and then started issuing tariffs. But it doesn't say that the president can do that in the law. And two courts came out and said, no, the president is acting unconstitutionally, and most of the tariffs have to go. And so it's in the Supreme Court right now, and it was being debated this morning. So I was reading a little bit of it, and you can listen to it. You can't actually, there's no cameras, but they have a microphone. You can listen to the Supreme Court ruling. And even though the Supreme Court is pretty pro-President Trump, they sound very opposed to this because it's not the law. Then the president could do it. So I don't know what's going to happen. President Trump has already basically said that he'll take this as a personal attack and maybe even close the Supreme Court, which of course he doesn't have the power. But then again, we are in unprecedented times, which is kind of amazing because they've been in shockingly pro-president. Yeah. Usually it won't be until probably maybe 3 or 4 months, but they might expedite this decision and make a ruling really fast. But it's up to their discretion. My guess is they might do this one fairly quick. What's that? Because you have to write the rulings out, and that takes a lot of time. So they would write the majority opinion and have all the judges go through the ruling. So it just takes a lot. Now I know they have to. The rulings can be 50, 60 pages, but they all get a edit. So back to this. So I'm not kidding. Once again, we're at unprecedented times. Speaking of that, did anyone see what happened to the stock market yesterday? People lost over $700 billion in paper value. That's more than I'm making a month. It actually is more than I'm making a month, or a year, or a lifetime. Huh? Why did it go down? Because all the AI companies, people are beginning to realize it's a bubble, and they're really overvalued. And companies are beginning to drop. We'll see what happens. Now, right now, people are like, oh, stock values drop. So what do people do? They buy stock. I'm checking the stock market right now, and it's gone up a little bit. We'll see if that's what they call the suckers market, or maybe the bubble will continue. Back to this. Well, one of the bitterest things, and this is a nasty attack, that Adams supporters, I'm going to call them Whigs, even though they weren't quite called Whigs yet, but that's coming. They made against Jackson. They actually made it against his wife. Rachel Jackson was a divorcee. And that's the actual divorce document. There's a locket of Rachel that Jackson kept while he was president and after. We'll get to why he kept that. And this is a woodcutting of their marriage. Getting divorced was very difficult, especially for women. And women who got a divorce were looked down upon as being tainted, immoral immediately. Men, not so much. Men, it was much easier for men to get divorced. Women, it was almost impossible, even if the marriage was incredibly abusive. Until the 1970s, it was almost impossible for women to get divorced. That's the husband approved. But anyways, back to this. Rachel got divorced, and they were married. But there was a problem. Here's the divorce decree. Rachel had moved away, and then they got married soon after the divorce decree was submitted to the court. The now Jacksons who were married thought it had been signed before they were married. The judge didn't sign it until a week after they were married. So technically, it was adultery, and she was a witness. So they accused her of being more tainted. So here it is, on a convicted adulteress and her paramour husband be placed in the highest. So they bitterly attacked her. And one more thing, after she left her husband and she was desperate, she had to work for part-time in a tavern. Now, a tavern, don't think of a bar. Tavern was still more like, think of like a restaurant, but also a place where you get a room for the night. But they said a woman working there, she must have been a prostitute. And so they bitterly attacked her. Interesting to high five about, but so she was attacked for this. And Jackson was furious. Jackson was not a man to mess with. Jackson fought over 100 duels. A number of them were about people who attacked the morality of his wife. But during the election, he blamed John Quincy Adams. And Rachel would die soon after the election, partially because she was ill. Jackson would blame this attack, and that would be the log that he would carry for the rest of it. But why did they use this attack? This was elite, saying Jackson, born a commoner, orphaned at a very young age. This is what happens when you allow them to run for office. Adams supporters use class. And the commoners are immoral, and that's why they're commoners. That's why they're poor. They're immoral, and that's why they don't have money. They'll waste it all on alcohol or booze, or I think you can get the next step to that. Infuriating Jackson. And this was used a lot by people. Oh, who was Adams's vice president? Huh? Calhoun, yeah. Anybody want to guess Jackson's vice president? Calhoun. Calhoun was the sitting vice president and running to be the vice president for Andrew Jackson against Adams. That shows you how crazy the politics were at that time. I'll tell you why in a second. But when the election finally happened, this is how close. Okay, I put both maps up for a reason. First off, let's just look at. You can see why crazy, winner take all, go to two parties. Look at the big victory for Jackson in the Electoral College. And remember, they're not counting popular votes. Look at the number of people voting. Look how many people more voted in just 4 years. Jackson would push for this partially to be elected, but he believed that average people could vote. He represented democracy and therefore would be the target of those opposed to democracy. And Jackson would win. Everyone got that? Here's a ballot. You get these little slips of paper and you put it in the ballot box. Whenever you see a ballot box in a political cartoon, they'll show it like as a glass sphere that you dropped it into, but it was actually a wooden box. He did it in public. You would take these ballots, and you notice it's for Jackson and Calhoun, and these are the electors. To this day, you vote for electors. There's still a few states that put them down on the ballot. Montana does not. And you vote in front of everybody. You take this little piece of paper. Later on, it would be a check. Heck, later on, it would just be a colored piece of paper. Usually it's green for the Democrats and red for the Republicans. You just voted all Republicans, all Democrats. And you just, in front of everybody, put the ballot in the ballot. Yeah.
If both presidents, technically, what did you say? It's party.
We're coming to the Democrats and the Whigs, but then there were still technically most Republicans. It was really confusing time. We had the Democratic Republicans versus the National. So your question just shows you how incredibly confusing everything was. And then Calhoun's going to lead the Democrats. Nobody won. That's another story. Well, certain people did. Well, I love the clean sweep. So that's a vote in Ohio. Jackson was elected president. Jackson's elected. And his inauguration in March of 1829 was unlike any that had ever happened. Very few people came to the inauguration. It was hard to get around. And this is still pre-railroads, but thousands made the pretty perilous trek. People live in this area here to the little tiny town of Washington, D.C. to have the first inauguration in the now fully refinished executive mansion. And they're already calling it the White House because they had to use whitewash because of the scorch marks from the War of 1812. You might see one more thing about the White House. This is the original building, and it was meant to be a very modest building, sure, a mansion, but not a palace. It was the people's house. That we, the people from the Constitution, even though they were pretty elite. You see this little east wing right here? That was added for additional space during when Jefferson was president. Anybody know why I mentioned that now? Yeah, that was part that President Trump had demolished. Part of the White House has been demolished and is in ruins right now because he wants to build a ballroom. And so it's one of the interesting things that just happened. But back to this. Thousands came. Now, Jackson did a very short little speech. And then they opened up the new White House. Well, the newly built White House, rebuilt. And all these people just kind of came in. You could go to the White House and just knock on the door back then. And just go see the president. There was no fence around it. It was the people's house. Things have changed. But they just stormed in. And pretty soon there were people running all over the White House. Wow, this is our house. We the people own this house. We're the people's president. And in the foyer, right in front, was, well, let me ask you a question. What food represents democracy? We all know it. You all know it. Cheese. A massive block of cheese was sitting in the foyer. People just cut out big hunks and then ran around the White House. The idea of just people running around the White House carrying cheese makes me laugh every time. Who here doesn't like cheese? Thank you, y'all. There's a few people who don't like cheese. They don't like America, right? How dare they? How unpatriotic. We should have a cheese thing. It's a big block of cheese. We'll get nice. Wait. This is one I wish we had photography. I would love to have a picture of the people running around with cheese. You can imagine what his detractor said. Look what happens when you pick a bunch of commoners. They're uncouth, regular people, destroying, defacing the people's house. So, this is where we come up with the concept of Jacksonian democracy. And what Jackson supporters would say is that he's actually defending Jeffersonian democracy. I missed the point. Sorry, I had to shut that door across the hall. Visual me. I know it's stuff. We won. We won? We got cheese? Huh? See the picture? There's Jackson. See this little group of people defending the people. And this is supposed to be the White House. Just go with it. The people's house from a bunch of rabid dogs. Or as they would have said back then, cur dogs. And these cur dogs were actually representing the elite, who are hungry and ravenous and will eat everything. All the wealth, if not protected, and the democracy and everything else by Andrew Jackson. So that is Andrew Jackson defending us from them. But do you see it? You see it? What the heck is this?
That guy.
This picture is a little bit clearer.
Are they fighting the dog?
I don't know what it is. What is this thing? Is it a leprechaun? There's one here too. Are they evil? Are they good? Are they reptoids? Are they salamanders? I don't know. All I know is they're awesome, and I wish I had one. But I have a feeling, though, they would probably be evil and control me. you know they have magical powers.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the big thing about Jacksonian democracy? Suffrage. Suffrage. More people than ever before could vote. But it's a contradiction too. And this is the reason you got to put down. This is the reason. They begin to get rid of property requirements. The states in the kind of the aqua green in 1800, you had to own property. A lot of property to vote. But by 1830, the states had read, okay, you had to pay a tax, but you didn't have to own property. And see the states in yellow? That was universal suffrage. But suffrage went up for whom? White men. And by 1860, the United States had almost universal white male suffrage. The last state would be South Carolina. If you're a believer in democracy, and I'm very biased towards democracy, this is a good thing. It's a massive step. And Jackson represented that people have the power to decide their own fate. But you notice the people doesn't represent over half the population. And remember I told you how women with property could vote when the country was first formed? All of those laws, or more like, think of them more like customs in states that allowed women with property to vote, by 1830, they would all be gone. And so this is a big step towards democracy and people's rule. A big step towards, and also a big step back. And so it's not this gentle glide towards leaving democracy, more democracy. It stops and starts. It comes and goes. You can go back after Reconstruction. It's a massive step towards voting rights. And then many of those will be taken away. So that's suffrage. So what is Jacksonian democracy? What made it for the suffrage? First one, this ironclad belief that Jackson had that the common man, meaning not born of aristocratic birth, was powerful. But remember the Constitution we mentioned before was anti-democratic? It was specifically written to not have the people choose. The president, not chosen by the people. Senators were still chosen by state assemblies. Judges, the people have no voice at all. Only the House, and even then most people couldn't vote. If it's for the common man, but the Constitution is anti-democratic, it's this. It's more of an attitude change, a belief change, that the United States represents average people, even though in reality, it doesn't quite work that way. Remember, to this day, you do not vote for president. And democracy equals sovereignty, the power in the common man. And what does that mean? Majority rule. And the term they use for the vote then, and we'll have it for the next 100 years, they'll call it self-determination, the vote. Sometimes you might see it called popular sovereignty, and we'll come back to that, so I'm not worrying about it today. But that's majority rule. So the idea being, when it comes right down to it, the majority will decide. So no matter what happens, eventually it'll come to them. This is going to be bitterly opposed by the elite. And the distrust of this Eastern cabal establishment of wealthy individuals, could be plantation owners, could be the big capitalists, who are trying to take over the country for their own personal gain, represented by the Bank of the United States. And this is Jackson fighting off the many-headed monster that was this elite, the big one's the bank. You're going to see a lot of monster cartoons and the monster representing the bank. Next, Jackson believed in the spoil system. The people's will was for Jackson's supporters, and therefore patronage should go to Jackson's supporters. Does anybody know what patronage is? I'll give you a second to write down patronage. Here's patronage. Government jobs. Jackson said, my supporters get the jobs. We want, it's the people's will. That's what the people want. The democracy to take these jobs. Now he did, and back then, every federal government job, there weren't that many, mostly post office. The president could hire and fire at will. So Jackson said, I'm going to put my people in every job. He actually did not replace any more workers than anybody else. but he was very open about it. Technically, the president can't do that. Most jobs are professional civil service. This started in 1883. And the president just can't fire most federal government jobs. There are millions. Everything from soldiers to postal workers to IRS to FBI, you name it. And the president can only hire and fire the top of the departments. Now, I should add, President Trump says he can hire and fire anybody. Has fired over 1 million. And he's claiming he's going to fire all government workers during the shutdown, now the longest shutdown in history. I don't believe him now. The election last night might have persuaded him to change a little bit. Let's see, but probably not. That's another thing. We will see. We are in unprecedented times. So, patronage. Next. Let me backtrack. Before you write that down, let me just say. So the person running as, let's pick the new parties at that time. Running for governor or house or president. For the Democrats, it's called the nominee. The person for the Whigs is called the nominee. But who chooses them? Before this era, they were chosen by the elites, like congressional elites. During this era, it went to party conventions, not elites, where Democrats would go to a state convention and pick their nominee for governor, or what all the positions. And Whigs or Democrats from all over the country would go to a national convention and pick their nominee to run as the Democrat or the Whig for president. So it wouldn't just be a tiny group of elite. Oh, sure, there'd be elites, but with a massive convention of thousands. Heck, by the time Lincoln was elected, it'd be a 10,000 person convention in this big, scary wooden building called the Wigwam. All these people would come and pick, and that was seen as more democratic. And party convention would pick the presidential nominee for both parties. Well, the Democrats still 68, and the Republicans still 72. There's still conventions, but now they're more just like window dressing and propaganda things. But this is one thing that's different. A third party did it the first one, then the Democrats followed. A third party. What was the third party? The anti-Mason party. Has anyone ever heard of the Masons, the Masonic Order? The Masonic Order is a secret society, at this time only made up of men. And these men had to go through a secret initiation, they had secret meetings, and they had a little bit of kind of deism. This goes back to medieval Europe about groups of literally Masons who would get together. And so they had a secret society. And there was a belief that Masons, this is one thing you have to write down, a conspiracy of Masons to take it. This secret group, why are they meeting in secret? Because they're hiding their plans to take over the country. A conspiracy. And what was the proof? 7 of the first 8 presidents, Masons. Andrew Jackson was a Mason. There are still Masons. There's a Masonic Hall. They're not near as big as they used to be. And Masonic Hall is a big, nice meeting area. They have a Masonic library. That's downtown. It has the Masonic apron of Meriwether Lewis in Hamilton. And the Masons, when they were really popular, built a massive meeting area that when the Masons started losing people, they sold to the city. And the Masons have this kind of Eastern tradition, a lot about the Eastern Star, the East. I think they started in Europe, so the East. Anybody know what building was a Masonic hall that the city would buy? You ever wonder why the city center looks like it has a arrowhead? Because that's an old Masonic hall. So, the Masons. Oh, if you know any Masons today, it's really funny to imagine Masons today being part of a plot to take over the country. It's actually really fun. We're doing conspiracy theories and special topics in American history, and nobody picked the Masons this year. But that was there's still people who talk about that. There are Masonic symbols on our dollar. If you ever wonder about the eyeball and the pyramid, that's Masonic. But there are people who have you ever heard of the Illuminati or Bohemian Grove or New World Order or Reptoids? They all kind of come from this Masonic conspiracy. What's your conspiracy again? Oh yeah, CIA assassination, another. That's a great conspiracy, but a good topic. So, Jackson supporters would soon call themselves the Democracy, but pretty soon the Democratic Party. And that is the basis of the Democratic Party today. They sometimes, the leadership might become very elite, like they do in both political parties. But the Democratic Party, their roots was always common man, working man, etc. And you see a little bit of this like the 1930s to the 1970s. Then elite, it's hard to keep the elite out of these parties, but they're made up of groups like Westerners, farmers. Most farmers were small immigrants. And what religion were many of the new immigrants by then? And here's the biggie showing the change of society. Wage workers. We're looking to Jackson. The new democracy. Winner take all? So what about those who hated the democracy? Anti-Jackson elites. They would rally around, actually, they didn't like John Quincy Adams either. I should add, John Quincy Adams was the second president to not go to his successor's inauguration. The first was his father. And then Andrew Jackson, and then, then Andrew Johnson, and then Trump. So, anti-democracy. They despise the democracy. And they call democracy king mob or king numbers. I think numbers is really it's kind of my favorite name for the opposition to democracy. Why numbers? Whoever got the most votes in numbers won. So they say Jackson is only acting like a king because he can get more of the mob to vote for him. And they looked at the spoils system and called it the cult of mediocrity. You're going to pick a bunch of mediocre commoners when we need experts, elite, to run these positions. Now that, of course, is not true at all, but that fits in that class argument that only the elite, the wealthy, can be intelligent. And that they're godless Democrats. They were able to appeal to native sentiment, the Whigs. Why? For Catholics, we all know Catholics aren't true Christians, which, as we should also know, is insane because that's where Christianity comes from, but that also shows you how prejudice can be used. Use people's fears. And they would soon dub themselves the Whigs because I hate Andrew Jackson would not fit on a button. And so they were mostly, the roots of it were the new capitalists in banking, new financiers, and plantation owners. Some of the churches, though, remember the Second Great Awakening. The Whigs would cultivate them with the anti-Catholic bias. The problem with the Whigs have is they're kind of in the minority. There are more people who might be more naturally Republicans. I'm sorry, did I say Republicans? Democrats. So we have two new political parties. No, the Whigs did not become the Republican Party. That's not the way it happened. It's much more complex. And we'll get to that. So, the Whigs at first tried to win by just not letting people vote. But eventually they realized we're stuck. We got to find another way. And they would find a great way. Very effective. So that's Andrew Jackson. And the thing was, Andrew Jackson, much of the thing, there's going to be a lot of stories and rumors about Andrew Jackson. Most of them are not true. Jackson was seen as wild, as crazy, uncontrollable temper. Oh, he had a temper. But uncontrollable temper? No. He was very polite, incredibly loyal to his friends. Urbane, intelligent. No, he did not have a formal education, but he was self-taught. He was a very successful lawyer. He was also a slave worker, and that was true. But there's all these stories about him. Like, I literally just read the other day about someone trying to say how bad Andrew Jackson was, and said that he believed the earth was flat. No, he did not. But that was something that the Whigs said about him to say he was uneducated economy. And not to say good or bad about Jackson, but Jackson had a lot of stories about him that were not true. It's amazing how effective these stories were. But there are going to be three big issues to show his fight for democracy. And some might not see it, and I'll get into it. What are the three issues? Indian removal, the nullification crisis, and the bank war. So we'll get to all three. All three he would see as symbols as his fight for regular common men, a white man. Jackson would fight over 100 duels. If he was a, well, heck yeah. When he was elected president, he had 2 bullets in him. He had a bullet here and a bullet a quarter inch from his heart. And both of them hurt all the time. He was in constant pain. He drank whiskey all the time. Not, well, I'm sure he might have been. Various reasons to drink it, but it was a pain. And while he was president, they had to remove his bullet because it was starting to rub against his joint and against body. Not only terrible pain, but it was pinching his nerve. And so it was leaving part of his body paralyzed. And so they removed it. Hey, 1832, how do you do surgery right here? What do they do? They gave him 5 shots of whiskey and a piece of leather to bite him. Nice. And what made a good surgeon in 1832? Speed. Yeah, speed with a knife. Got it. Because your patient was moving and screaming. Yeah, they removed that, but he died with that bullet. They couldn't do anything about it. And he only weighed about 130 pounds because he could hardly eat because of the punctured his stomach to the bullet. And he had scars all over. A British officer during the Revolutionary War when he was 13 cut 2 big hunks of his cheek out. He had other wounds. I mean, Jackson was a pretty interesting guy. And that bullet he had right here next to his heart was in a duel. He fought a duel against a guy named Charles Dickinson. And there were 3 reasons he fought this duel. The first one was, they were both slave owners. They marketed slaves. It was about a business deal with humans. It was also about horse racing, gambling. And the other one was the biggie. Dickinson attacked his wife, Rachel. Immoral. So they fought a duel in Nashville. So after Burr killed Hamilton here, the dueling here kind of ended. I know, darn it. But in the Wild West of Tennessee at that time, they're still dueling all the time. And they fought in the open. It was either in the main street of Nashville or it was outside of Nashville. They fought the duel and there was an audience. They stood 20 paces apart. There were people cheering on both sides, which is kind of surreal. And Jackson, most of his duels would end. Remember I told you they would shoot in the air, shoot in the ground? Jackson, though, would always show up and make the other person stand them and then let them decide. He would just stand there and glare at them. Jackson was not a great shot, but he always figured, I'll let them shoot first. And you know what? If they want to kill me, they better have iron nerves, as I do. Then I'll decide their fate. So, when they fought, Jackson is glaring at him. Dickinson fired, and Dickinson, okay, we don't know exactly what Dickinson was thinking, but clearly must decide that Jackson was somebody he did not want as a permanent enemy. Hit him right here. Ripped out a couple ribs, through his lung, and went about a quarter inch from his heart. Now, Dickinson must have thought that that wound was mortal. What did Jackson do when he was hit like that? He shook it off, blood immediately just spewing out, pouring around his feet. And he went, and then glared at him. I always wonder what Dickinson must have been thinking at that very moment as Jackson pulled his pistol up and fired. Where did he hit him? Right here. And then Jackson walked nearly a quarter of a mile to his doctor to see if they could do anything about the bullet. His lung was certainly collapsed and he had broken a few ribs. Jackson would later say, I would have killed him even if he would have hit me in my mind. Which I love the term mind for brain. And I believe him. Jackson was the toughest man I could think of. I'll tell you another story about Jackson. If Jackson was walking here right now, we would be afraid. Especially because he died 180 years ago. But also because Andrew Jackson, tomorrow quiz, 11, 12 questions, sound good? Huh? What is food? Crazy Jack. Oh, I got more stuff.
Oh, questions.
We're gonna go 15. Would that be more sane?
No,
90.
I get the chance to walk
Anytime.
in.
Yeah, anytime. What do you mean?
This period, like just.
Yeah, first period I have a prep, and the second period I have AP US history those periods.
Okay.
Just come in, you can come in anytime, just come in, I'll just throw you in the hallway, we'll take a look. You're going to Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Oh, did he? Oh, keep that. Good. Keep working? We're looking at pizza. It's all show up. James, service. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good lunch. I have peanut butter and jelly. I know I'm bragging. Gabe, did you find nullification? Did you have your list?
Oh.